This millionaire found these 3 newborns in the trash, but had no idea what would happen after he helped them. What happened is shocking. Leave a comment and subscribe to my channel to support my work. The silence of the mansion was deafening. Arthur Sterling gazed out of his office window at the rain falling intermittently. While his mind wandered through memories he tried, unsuccessfully, to bury in the past. It was a cold August night in Chicago, and the emptiness of the house only amplified the loneliness that had consumed him for years. The walls, adorned with expensive paintings and designer furniture, couldn't disguise the heavy atmosphere that hung in the air. His footsteps echoed through the empty hallways as he walked to the living room, carrying a glass of whiskey that had long lost its ice. On the wall, a framed portrait caught his attention. A girl of approximately 15 years old, brown hair, and a radiant smile embracing him in happier times. "Claire," he murmured, feeling the weight of that name in his throat. The pain of loss, even after so many years, still suffocated him as if it were recent. The accident that took his only daughter also took with it his will to live. Since then, Arthur had taken refuge in his work, turning a thriving company into a true empire. The money multiplied in his bank accounts, but nothing filled the void left by her. That night, after returning from yet another exhausting business trip, all he wanted was to succumb to an alcohol-induced sleep, as he had done for years. However, a distant and muffled cry broke the silent routine of the mansion. Initially, Arthur thought it was his mind playing tricks, as sometimes happened on the loneliest nights. But the sound persisted, now clearer. Intrigued and slightly disturbed, he headed to the back door of the mansion from where the noise seemed to be coming. The rain had increased, and the sound of the drops against the roof almost covered the small sobs that guided him. When he opened the door, what he saw left him paralyzed. 3 babies, none appearing to be more than a few months old, were abandoned next to the garbage dumpster. The children were precariously protected from the rain by a piece of plastic, nestled in an old basket. Their little faces, red from crying and cold, made something awaken inside Arthur, something he thought had been dead for a long time. Without thinking twice, he picked up the basket and took the children inside. In the clarity of the living room, he could observe them better. There were 2 boys and a girl, all very similar, probably triplets. They were dressed in simple but clean clothes and seemed well cared for, despite the circumstances in which they were found. Arthur picked up his cell phone and dialed 911, but before he completed the call, he noticed a small note attached to the basket. With trembling hands, he unfolded the paper partially soaked by the rain. The handwriting was irregular, as if it had been written in a hurry. "Please take care of them. Take care. Their lives are in danger. I can't explain now, but I promise I'll come back one day. Protect my children." Arthur's heart raced. There was something about that desperate plea that touched him deeply. He looked again at the babies, who now, in the warmth of the house, had calmed down and were watching him with curious eyes. One of them smiled, a toothless smile that made his heart clench in a way he hadn't felt in years. His housekeeper, Martha, who had worked in the house for decades and was practically family, appeared frightened by the noise. Upon seeing the scene, she brought her hands to her mouth in surprise. "Good heavens, Mr. Sterling! Where did these children come from?" "They were abandoned in the dumpster, Martha," he replied, still stunned by the situation. "I need to call the police, social services." Yes, of course," agreed Martha, already approaching the babies with the maternal instinct that was characteristic of her. "But first, we need to take care of them. They're freezing. I'll prepare a warm bath and something for them to eat. Do you still have that special formula we bought for Marlene's children?" Arthur nodded, remembering the stock of supplies he always kept for when his housekeeper's young children visited the mansion. He watched Martha pick up one of the babies in her arms, with the naturalness of someone who had done this all their life. The child immediately snuggled into her arms, seeking warmth. At that moment, something strange happened to Arthur. The sight of those abandoned babies, so vulnerable and dependent, awakened in him feelings that had long been dormant. It was as if fate had chosen that rainy night to put in his path a mission that he did not know if he was prepared to accept. While Martha busied herself taking care of the children, Arthur remained seated in his armchair, the phone still in his hand, the 911 number not dialed. Something prevented him from making that call. Perhaps it was the desperate note, perhaps it was the innocent smiles of the babies, or perhaps it was simply fate playing yet another of its ironic tricks on his life. The night wore on, and with it grew in his chest an inexplicable certainty. Those children were not there by chance. There was a mystery behind that abandonment, and something in his gut told him that he needed to find out what it was. But for now, all he could do was ensure they were safe and warm. What Arthur did not know was that that night would mark only the beginning of a journey that would change his life forever, unearthing long-hidden secrets and bringing to light truths that he could never have imagined. The dawn dragged on as Arthur remained awake, watching the 3 babies who were now sleeping placidly in the improvised cribs that Martha had arranged in the library. The sunrise found him with deep, dark circles under his eyes and conflicting thoughts. The housekeeper, who also hadn't been able to sleep, was serving the 3rd cup of coffee when the doorbell rang. "Mr. Sterling," she called in a low voice so as not to wake the children. "It's the social worker you called last night." He nodded, feeling an inexplicable tightness in his chest. After hours of reflection, he had decided to notify only social services, avoiding involving the police for now. Something in the note left with the babies disturbed him deeply. That plea for protection seemed too sincere to be ignored. The social worker, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Davies, examined the situation with professional eyes. 3 abandoned babies, apparently triplets, approximately 4 months old, she noted on her clipboard. "Mr. Sterling, we need to start the procedures to send them to a suitable shelter." The words of the social worker caused physical discomfort in Arthur. What if... He hesitated for a moment. "What if I wanted to take temporary custody of them?" Mrs. Davies raised her eyes from her papers, surprised. "Mr. Sterling, I know. Your intentions are noble, but it's not that simple. Do you have experience with babies, a family structure? Besides, we need to locate the mother of these children." "I have more than enough financial resources," he argued, his voice gaining firmness. "I can hire a full staff to take care of them. Martha already has experience with children, and my house has plenty of space. As for the mother, she left a note saying their lives were in danger. I can't simply ignore that." The conversation was interrupted by a sharp cry coming from the library. Martha hurried to attend to the children, and Arthur followed her, leaving the social worker momentarily alone with her notes. Upon entering the room, he found one of the boys awake, his little face red from crying. Without thinking, he approached and picked him up, surprising himself with the naturalness of the gesture. The baby calmed down almost instantly in his arms, tightly gripping his index finger. That simple touch awakened in Arthur long-held memories of when he held Claire, of her first words, her first steps. The pain of loss, always present, mixed with a new feeling, a kind of hope that he couldn't explain. Mrs. Davies watched the scene from the door, her professional expression softening slightly. "Mr. Sterling, I understand your concern, but we need to follow legal procedures. I'll prepare the necessary documentation for temporary guardianship, but you need to understand that this is temporary. If the mother appears—" "When she appears," Arthur interrupted, "she'll have a lot of explaining to do. Until then, I'll do whatever it takes to keep these children safe." The following days were a whirlwind of changes at the mansion. One of the guest rooms was transformed into a complete nursery, with 3 cribs, a dresser, a changing table, and a comfortable armchair for feeding. Arthur hired 2 experienced nannies to take turns caring for the babies, although Martha insisted on personally supervising every detail. It was during one of those nights, while watching the nannies preparing the babies for sleep, that Arthur realized they hadn't been given names yet. In the temporary documents, they were just Baby 1, Baby 2, and Baby 3. The idea of naming them scared him. It was like taking on an even greater responsibility for their lives. "You need to give them names," said Martha, as if reading his thoughts. "We can't keep calling the children numbers." Arthur approached the cribs, observing each of the babies. The most restless boy, who always woke up first, had a curious look that reminded him of Claire. "This one will be Michael," he decided, gently touching his little hand. The other boy, calmer and more observant, was named Gabriel, and the girl, who had a smile capable of lighting up the room, was christened Clara. The routine of the mansion changed completely. Business meetings were now interrupted by cries and laughter, and the oppressive silence that had previously dominated the place gave way to a new energy. Arthur began working more from home, adapting his office to be able to monitor the babies even during video conferences. It was during one of these mornings of remote work that he noticed a strange movement on the neighboring property. A young woman watched his house with peculiar interest, especially when the nannies went out to take the triplets to sunbathe in the garden. There was something in her behavior that left Arthur uneasy. Determined to investigate, he asked his security guard to find out more about the mysterious observer. The answer came at the end of the day. Her name was Nancy. She lived in a simple house in the suburbs, and she had recently moved in to work as a cleaning lady in the house next door. What intrigued Arthur most was the report that the young woman had been seen crying while watching the babies. His instinct, sharpened by years of difficult negotiations, told him that there was something wrong with that story. He decided he needed to talk to her personally. The next day, he strategically positioned himself in the garden, waiting for the moment when Nancy appeared. When he saw her approaching the fence, he called her over with a gesture. The young woman hesitated, visibly nervous, but eventually approached. "I've noticed that you've been watching the children a lot," he said directly. "Is there any special reason for that?" Nancy paled, her hands trembling visibly. I can't talk about it," she murmured, looking anxiously around. "It's not safe." Before Arthur could insist, she quickly walked away, leaving him even more intrigued. That reaction only confirmed his suspicions. There was much more to that story than a simple abandonment of babies. That night, while cradling Clara to sleep, Arthur made a decision. No matter what he discovered, he wouldn't allow anything bad to happen to those children. They had awakened in him a purpose that had long been lost, and he would do anything to protect them. What he didn't know was that his determination would be put to the test much sooner than he imagined. The next morning, upon going down for coffee, he found Martha in a state of agitation. "Mr. Sterling," she said, handing him a crumpled piece of paper. "I found this under the kitchen door." It was another note, written in the same hurried handwriting as the first. "They've found out where the babies are. Don't trust anyone. They're closer than you think." The note found by Martha put Arthur on high alert. Immediately, he reinforced the security of the mansion, hiring more guards and installing additional cameras. The nannies were instructed not to take the children out to the garden, and all the windows were to be kept closed and watched. The change in routine affected the baby's mood. Clara, especially, missed the outdoor walks and expressed her discontent with prolonged cries. On one of those restless nights, while trying to calm her down, Arthur was looking out the window of the room when he noticed a suspicious movement. Nancy was standing on the sidewalk under a heavy rain, staring at the mansion. There was something different about her posture. She seemed even more distressed than usual. Driven by an impulse, Arthur called Martha to stay with the children and went down quickly. When he opened the gate, he found the young woman trembling, drenched, and with her eyes red from crying. "Please," she whispered, "I need to talk to you. It's about my sister, about the babies." Arthur led her inside, ignoring Martha's protests about the risks of trusting strangers. In the library, after settling down with a cup of hot tea and a blanket over her shoulders, Nancy began to speak. "My sister's name is Jordana." Her voice was low, filled with pain. She's the mother of the triplets. She disappeared a few weeks ago, right after the children vanished. I thought she was dead until I saw the babies in your garden." Arthur's heart raced. Why did she abandon her own children? What's going on? Nancy took a deep breath, her hands still trembling as she held the cup. Jordana had a very difficult life. Our mother died early, and she ended up getting involved with the wrong people. When she got pregnant, she tried to change her life. But the father of the children, he's a dangerous man. Tears streamed down Nancy's face as she continued. He abused her, controlled her every move. When the babies were born, it got even worse. One day, Jordana found out something about him, something serious. She never told me what it was, but she was terrified. She said she needed to protect the children at all costs. Arthur listened attentively, feeling a knot forming in his stomach. The story touched on old wounds, memories of his own daughter that he tried to keep buried. "Where is your sister now?" "I don't know," Nancy sobbed. "She called once, from a blocked number. She was confused, scared. She said she had managed to put the babies in a safe place, but that she needed to hide. After that, I haven't heard from her." The silence that followed was interrupted by the cry of one of the babies upstairs. Nancy raised her eyes, an expression of love and pain crossing her face. "They're my nephews and niece. Can I see them? Please." Arthur hesitated for a moment, but something in her eyes convinced him. He led her to the children's room, where Martha was rocking Michael, trying to calm him down. Upon seeing the babies, Nancy fell to her knees, crying copiously. "They've grown so much," she murmured between sobs, cautiously approaching the cribs. "Clara looks just like Jordana when she was a baby." It was at that moment that Arthur noticed something strange. "How do you know we call her Clara? We haven't mentioned the names we gave them." Nancy froze, realizing her slip-up. Her face paled even further and she began to tremble again. I heard the nannies calling her that in the garden," she tried to explain, but her voice betrayed her nervousness. Before Arthur could question her further, a noise coming from the garden caught his attention. Through the window, he saw a shadow, moving quickly among the trees. Martha quickly turned off the lights in the room, while Arthur instructed Nancy to remain silent with the children. "Someone's watching us," he whispered, taking out his cell phone to alert security. However, when he turned to speak to Nancy again, she had disappeared. The door to the room was ajar, and a cold wind was blowing through it. Running down the hall, Arthur reached the staircase in time to see Nancy hurriedly leaving through the back door. There was something in her hands. It looked like a small object that shone in the moonlight. Arthur's heart leaped when he recognized what it was: the gold chain with a small angel that had belonged to his daughter Claire, kept for years in a locked drawer in his office. The discovery left him stunned. How had Nancy managed to get into his office? Why had she stolen that specific piece of jewelry? The questions multiplied in his mind, but one in particular tormented him. What was the true connection between that mysterious woman and his past? That night, Arthur couldn't sleep. Sitting in the armchair in the children's room, he watched the triplets sleep while his mind worked incessantly. There was something familiar about the whole situation, details that seemed to want to emerge from a long-buried past. It was during this vigil that another detail hit him like a lightning bolt. the shape of the handwriting on the note left with the babies. There was something strangely familiar about that handwriting. He got up quickly and went to his office, rummaging in an old box where he kept the last letters that Claire had written before the accident. With trembling hands, he compared the notes. The similarity was undeniable. The letters had the same unique characteristics, the same peculiar slant. How hadn't he noticed it before? His heart was beating so hard that it felt like it wanted to jump out of his chest. The morning found him still immersed in old photographs and documents, desperately searching for a connection that made sense. It was then that his cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. When he answered, a female voice, choked and hesitant, made his world stop. "Dad, it's me. I need your help." The phone slipped from Arthur's trembling hands, falling onto the table. That voice, after so many years, that voice that he thought he had lost forever. Recovering from the initial shock, he managed to pick up the phone again. "Claire!" His voice barely came out. "Is that really you, my daughter?" A sob on the other end of the line confirmed his suspicions. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I can't talk much, it's not safe. But I need you to protect my children. He's going to try to take them back. Where are you? I need to see you. I need to understand what's going on," Arthur pleaded, feeling the tears running down his face. "I can't say now. I'm in a safe place, but not for long. Dad, promise me you'll take care of them. They're the only good thing I have left in my life." The line went silent suddenly. Arthur tried to call back several times, but it went straight to voicemail. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions and disjointed thoughts. His daughter was alive. His Claire, who he thought he had lost in the accident, was alive and was the mother of the triplets. Martha found him still sitting in his office, his gaze lost in the void. "Mr. Sterling, the babies are awake. They need you." He raised his teary eyes to his faithful housekeeper. "Martha, Claire is alive. It's her, the mother of the children. My daughter is alive." The old housekeeper needed to lean on the door to avoid falling. Good heavens, but how? The accident? "I don't know yet," Arthur replied, running his hands over his tired face. "But now a lot of things are starting to make sense. The way the babies were left here, specifically at my house, the notes with her handwriting, and Nancy must know much more than she's telling." At that moment, Clara's cry echoed through the hallway. Arthur got up quickly. His grandchildren, they were his grandchildren. The thought hit him with full force as he climbed the stairs. Upon entering the room, he looked at the babies with different eyes. How hadn't he noticed it before? Clara had the same eyes as Claire, the same smile that lit up the room. Picking the little one up, Arthur felt an even greater love overflowing from his chest. It wasn't just the protective instinct that had arisen when he found them. It was the love of a grandfather, multiplied by the pain of so many years thinking he had lost his only daughter. "I'm going to find out the whole truth," he whispered to Clara, who was looking at him with her innocent eyes. "I'm going to bring your mother back to us." The following hours were of intense activity. Arthur summoned his best private investigators, trusted people who had worked for him for years. He provided all the details he had. Claire's call, Nancy's information, the stolen chain. "I want you to find my daughter," he ordered. "Search all clinics, hospitals, shelters. She said she's in a safe place, but she needs help. And I want to know everything about Nancy, her past, her connections, every detail of her life." While the investigators began their work, Arthur dedicated himself to protecting the babies even more. He hired additional security guards, installed an advanced monitoring system throughout the property. He wouldn't let anything happen to his grandchildren. It was during one of those nights of vigil that Martha brought a disturbing discovery. "Mr. Sterling, "I found this among Nancy's things, in the house next door," she said, handing him a crumpled piece of paper. It was an old photograph, yellowed by time. In it, a teenage Claire smiled next to a man Arthur didn't know. On the back, a date, exactly 1 week before the supposed accident that had taken her from his life. "How did you get this, Martha?" he asked, studying every detail of the image. "The lady of the house next door asked me to clean the room where Nancy was staying. She left in a hurry last night, leaving some things behind. I found the photo fallen behind the dresser." Arthur examined the image more closely. The man next to his daughter had a dangerous air, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. On the back of the photo, in addition to the date, there was a small note, "Promise of eternal love, J." Arthur's heart froze. That man must be the father of the triplets, the man Nancy had described as dangerous. What had happened to transform a promise of eternal love into a story of flight and despair? His reflections were interrupted by a noise coming from the garden. The security lights turned on automatically, revealing a female figure running towards the back of the property. Arthur recognized her immediately. It was Nancy. Without thinking twice, he ran after her. "Nancy, wait, we need to talk." The woman stopped abruptly, turning to him with eyes full of tears. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling. I didn't want to lie, but he forced me. He said he would kill my sister if I didn't help." "Who? The man in the photo, the father of the babies?" Nancy nodded, trembling. "Jorge. He found out where the children are. He's coming to get them, and he won't stop until he gets what he wants." "What exactly does he want?" Arthur asked, feeling a chill down his spine. "Your fortune," Nancy replied in a broken voice. "He found out who Claire really was when she was still pregnant. He planned everything, but she found out and fled with the children. Now he—" The sound of glass breaking inside the house interrupted the conversation. The two turned in time to see a shadow moving quickly on the first floor, exactly where the baby's room was. Martha's desperate scream echoed through the night. "Mr. Sterling, help! He's taking the children!" Arthur felt the blood run cold in his veins upon hearing Martha's scream. Without thinking twice, he ran towards the mansion, with Nancy on his heels. The sound of the baby's crying echoed through the house, mixing with the housekeeper's desperate screams. Upon arriving at the children's room, they were faced with a terrifying scene. A tall man, the same one from the photograph, held Michael and Gabriel, one in each arm. Martha was lying on the floor, apparently having been pushed while trying to stop him. Clara was crying desperately in her crib, not yet reached by the intruder. "Jorge, for the love of God, don't do this," cried Nancy, placing herself between the man and Clara's. "Grib, they're just babies." "Get out of the way, Nancy," he roared, his bloodshot eyes conveying a terrifying fury. "You already betrayed me once by helping Claire hide them. Don't get involved again." Arthur took a step forward, trying to remain calm despite the terror he felt. "Put my grandchildren down, right now." Jorge laughed, a cold and humorless sound. "Your grandchildren? Ah, so you already know. Claire must have finally mustered the courage to tell the truth. That ungrateful woman, after everything I did for her. What you did was destroy her life," Nancy shouted, tears streaming down her face. "You manipulated a teenager, alienated her from her family with lies, abused her for years." The babies were crying louder and louder, frightened by the screams and the tension in the room. Jorge began to back away towards the door, still holding Michael and Gabriel. "These boys are my life insurance, my passport to the Sterling fortune. Claire will have to show up if she wants to see them again, and when she comes—" His sentence was interrupted by a sudden movement in the doorway. A female figure emerged from the shadows of the hallway, and before anyone could react, she threw herself at Jorge. "You won't touch another hair on my children's heads," cried Claire, managing to make Jorge lose his balance. In the confusion that followed, Arthur and Nancy rushed to grab the babies. Martha, who had recovered, grabbed Clara from the crib and ran out of the room. Jorge, unbalanced by the surprise attack, let the boys slip from his arms. Arthur managed to catch Michael while Nancy reached Gabriel, but Jorge was not willing to give up easily. Recovering quickly, he grabbed Claire by the hair, pulling her violently. "You think you can beat me? After all these years, haven't you learned your lesson yet?" "The only thing I've learned," replied Claire, struggling to break free, "is that you've never been anything more than a coward who takes advantage of the weak." Arthur watched the scene paralyzed, his heart breaking as he saw his daughter in that situation. Claire was thinner than he remembered, with deep, dark circles under her eyes and visible scars on her arms, marks of years of abuse that he couldn't prevent. "Daughter," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. The moment of distraction was enough for Jorge to push Claire hard against the wall. The sound of the impact was followed by a cry of pain. Claire slid to the floor, semi-conscious. "Now let's settle this once and for all," said Jorge, turning to Arthur. "You're going to make a transfer right now, or your precious little daughter is going to suffer much more than she already has." At that moment, something inside Arthur broke. Years of guilt, of repressed pain, of sleepless nights, imagining where he had gone wrong with his daughter, all exploded in a wave of protective fury. "You already took my daughter away from me once," he said, his voice trembling with rage. "You're not taking my family again." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Jorge lunged towards Arthur, who was still holding Michael. Nancy shouted a warning. Claire, gathering her last strength, managed to get up and throw herself between her father and her assailant. The impact of the movement caused Jorge to lose his balance again, but this time he was closer to the window. As he tried to lean on the curtain, the fabric gave way, and he stumbled backwards, breaking the glass. Jorge's scream echoed through the night, followed by a dull thud. Claire ran to the window, looking down, and immediately fainted. Arthur quickly handed Michael to Nancy and rushed to support his daughter. "Claire! Daughter, hold on," he pleaded, holding her in his arms for the first time in years. Her face was pale, and a trickle of blood ran from her forehead. Martha had already called an ambulance, which arrived in minutes, along with the police. Jorge had survived the fall, but was seriously injured. He was taken under police custody to the hospital, where he would be under constant surveillance. While the paramedics attended to Claire, Arthur held her hand, silently promising that he would never leave her alone again. Tears ran freely down his face as he watched his daughter, so fragile and yet so strong. "Dad," she murmured, before being placed in the ambulance. "I'm sorry. I should have trusted you." "No, my daughter," he replied, his voice choked. "I'm the one who needs your forgiveness. I should have protected you better. I should have realized." At the hospital, while Claire received treatment, Arthur stayed in the waiting room with the triplets, who had finally calmed down. Martha and Nancy took turns helping with the children, while he couldn't take his eyes off the door through which his daughter had disappeared. The hours dragged on, and each minute seemed like an eternity. The doctor finally appeared, his serious face causing a pang in Arthur's heart. "Mr. Sterling," he began, "your daughter is stable, but she suffered a considerable head trauma," the doctor continued. "We'll need to keep her under observation for a few days. In addition, we found several signs of previous trauma that need to be addressed." Arthur felt his legs weaken. Martha quickly brought a chair so he could sit down. "Is she going to be okay, doctor?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Physically, yes. With time and proper care, she should recover. However, the emotional trauma is something that will need special attention. Your daughter shows clear signs of post-traumatic stress and profound depression." The doctor's words weighed on Arthur like lead. How many years of suffering had his daughter faced alone? How long did she spend believing she couldn't count on him? "Can I see her?" he asked, anxiously. The doctor nodded. She's sedated, but you can go in for a few minutes. I just ask that you don't tire her." In the hospital room, Arthur found his daughter sleeping, looking even more fragile under the fluorescent lights. Her thin arms were marked by old scars, and her face, even in sleep, carried an expression of concern. Sitting next to the bed, he took her delicate hand in his. "Forgive me, my daughter," he whispered. "Forgive your father for not protecting you as he should have." The following days were of intense activity. Arthur organized a full team of specialists to care for Claire, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a physical therapist. He transformed one of the rooms of the mansion into a true hospital suite, preparing for when she was discharged. Martha and Nancy took turns caring for the triplets, who seemed to sense their mother's presence even in the hospital. They were calmer when they were taken for quick visits. Clara, especially, had a different gleam in her eyes when she was near Claire. A week later, during one of those visits, Claire finally managed to talk about the past. Her voice was low, interspersed with moments of emotion, but she needed to share her story. "I was only 15 years old when I met Jorge," she began, holding Clara in her arms. "He seemed so mature, so different from the boys my age. He made me believe I was special, that no one understood me like he did." Arthur listened in silence, his heart aching with each word. "When he started talking bad about you, Dad, I didn't want to believe it, but he was very convincing. He said you only cared about money, that you would never really accept me. He was planting those ideas in my head until I started to doubt everything." Tears ran down Claire's face as she continued. "On the day of the supposed accident, he had everything planned. He convinced me to run away with him, said he had prepared a surprise, the car that caught fire. It was for you to think I was dead. Why, daughter, why didn't you come back before?" "Shame," she replied, her voice almost a whisper. "After I realized the mistake I had made, it was too late. Jorge showed his true face. He isolated me from everything and everyone, controlled my every move. When I got pregnant, I thought he would change, but it got even worse." Claire looked at her 3 children, now playing on the floor of the room, under Martha's watchful eye. "That's when I found out he was researching about you, about your fortune. I overheard a conversation of his. He was planning to use the children to blackmail you. That's when I understood that I needed to run." "How did you manage it?" Arthur asked, absorbing every word. "Nancy helped me. She worked at the house, where Jorge kept me, and saw how he treated me. When I told her I was your daughter, that I needed to protect my babies, she didn't hesitate to help. She was the one who organized our escape, who found people to leave the babies safely with you." At that moment, Michael crawled to the bed, raising his little arms to his mother. Claire picked him up carefully, cuddling him together with Clara. "But Jorge found out before I could join the children. He found me trying to catch the last bus to Chicago. It was horrible. I ended up having a nervous breakdown, and he had me admitted to a psychiatric clinic, saying that I was unbalanced. How did you get out of there?" "Nancy again. She found out where I was and helped me escape, but I couldn't come straight here. Jorge was watching me. I needed to make sure the babies were safe first." Gabriel, realizing that his siblings were in his mother's arms, began to cry, wanting attention too. Arthur picked him up and approached the bed, completing the family picture. "Now we're all together," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "And I promise that nothing and no one will separate us again." The following months were of intense recovery. Claire progressed a little each day, both physically and emotionally. The therapy sessions helped her process the years of trauma, while the unconditional love of her father and her children gave her strength to continue. Jorge was convicted for his actions and would serve a long sentence. When she heard the news, Claire finally managed to sleep an entire night without nightmares. The mansion, once so silent and cold, now overflowed with life. The triplets, already almost a year old, filled the hallways with their laughter and first steps. Martha, happier than ever, was proud to be called Grandma by the children. Nancy, at the insistence of Claire and Arthur, agreed to live with them. "You're part of this family now," Claire told a friend who had risked everything to save her. On an especially beautiful afternoon, while watching Claire play with the triplets in the garden, Arthur felt a peace that he hadn't experienced in years. His daughter smiled, a true smile that reached her eyes, something he feared he would never see again. Clara, already walking confidently, ran to him shouting, "Grandpa!" her first word. Arthur picked her up, tears of joy escaping his eyes. "Dad!" called Claire, approaching with Michael and Gabriel. "Thank you for not giving up on me, for taking care of my children when I couldn't, for giving me a second chance to have a family." Arthur hugged his daughter and grandchildren, his heart overflowing with love. "No, my daughter. Thank you for giving me the chance to be a father and a grandfather again. You are the greatest gift that life could give me." The sun set on the horizon, painting the sky with golden hues. In the Sterling mansion, a rebuilt family celebrated the love that overcame years of separation, pain, and fear. The wounds of the past were still there, but now they were marks of a story of overcoming and starting over. And every night, before going to sleep, Arthur gave thanks for the miracle that had transformed his life. His daughter was back. His grandchildren grew up happy and healthy, and his heart, once so empty, now overflowed with love and gratitude. Life had given him a second chance, and he wouldn't waste a single moment.